So I would like to introduce Stephen Berlin. He is a stamp collector for the past 70 years. He's a life member of IPS and a multitude of other organizations about stamps. He's a retired podiatrist, and he started collecting also postcard about 25 years ago. He was inspired by an Alaska dog sled mail that he found. And so now he's branching off on interception of mail. And this is why he will talk to us about what happened to the mail when it doesn't go how it's supposed to go.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for having me present to give a little talk about a special subject of mine. When I'm showing you these pictures or these slides on unusual interruptions of mail, I want you to picture that on a postcard because it can happen on a lot of the postcards that go through the mail where it becomes interrupted from various aspects. What we don't see here is what my craziness is, and my overall topic is called the devil's mail. Interruption by various forms, whether it be from war, disease, terrorism, weather, disasters of every kind. Now, I heard this evening that everybody was freezing, that I've heard that's on the program tonight. I hate to tell you this, but this broadcast for me is coming from the Virgin Islands. And it happens to be about 85 degrees here. So I can feel sorry for everyone that's seeing the ice and the snow from where you might be at. But regardless of that, I have been a collector, as Clovis has mentioned, for a long time, gone from stamps to dog sled mail to various other factors of mail delivery, and I collect unusual interruptions of mail. And that's pretty much where I'm coming from. And as Clarissa knows, I've recently published a book on mail robbery, postal history from around the world. So I'm going to show you some of those situations as well. But weather is the biggest disruption of mail that we come across. And natural disasters, whether it be floods, hurricanes, tornadoes, anything of this nature that interferes with the weather. Certainly postcards, as they go through the mail, are also interrupted, the same thing as an envelope. So, as I mentioned, when you see some of my presentations or my slides, think of the aspect that what we have is a postcard. This happens to be the earliest known recovered French flood cover from 1795. And it was going from to Marseille in France, and the letter took 6 days. That normally would have taken 1 day, but it's a very interesting and possibly the earliest known recorded flood cover, 1795. Well, this is an interesting Japanese postal card from 1875 that represented a major flood that took place in 1875. Over 6,000 deaths occurred during this disaster, but you can see the red shot mark in the center of the postcard, and it's basically talking about how the mail was delayed. Well, we talked about weather. This is an interesting cancellation, you might say, on a postal stationery envelope where the mail was delayed by a snow blockade. Snow blockade in this particular case was several feet high, and it was in Illinois, in Chicago area. So this is just a very interesting cover. I've only seen a few of these related to snow blockades, but this is a very interesting cover. Train disasters occur as part of the disasters. This was in Great Britain. This was called the Tay Bridge disaster. It was designed by a very famous engineer in Britain, And unfortunately, during this particular storm in 1879, the winds were so strong that the bridge fell apart, and particularly when the train was going over the bridge carrying all this mail. So when the train got to the place, they found out that 3,000 feet of the bridge had disappeared before the train got to it. The train naturally fell into the river, people were killed, and some of the mail was finally recovered. And this is one of the covers that was recovered from that disaster. Another interesting mail robbery, not mail robbery, but river mail robbery, you might say. A mail cart was actually carrying the mail from Kingston, from around the Kingston, Jamaica area when it hit a major storm. And it was carried by mules on a carriage. Well, the mail finally was picked up by people that recovered the mail, but unfortunately the mules drowned. And I believe this was the first cover that was actually brought around by mules in the transportation. Thought it was kind of interesting. And this is the marking on the back of the cover that basically describes the situation of this particular disaster. Another similar situation in 1896 from California, where a stagecoach came across a disaster from which a landslide blocked its route. So it had to go and redirect itself through the 10-mile creek, an area of water. Unfortunately, the water was so swift that unfortunately the driver and the horses drowned trying to get the mail to where it was supposed to go. Some of this mail was recovered, and you can see the designated marking on this particular cover, which basically discusses the incident. Well, you're all familiar with the Titanic. These are two specific pieces of mail that were carried by the postmaster. These were in his vest pocket when he was pulled out of the water, out of the frozen water. He was dead at the time. There are about 20 of these posting slips, which were actually attached to mailbags. These are two of the 20 that were recovered in his vest pocket. These are pretty rare pieces. You can see one that got a little water damage, and the other one is in pretty good shape. I thought this was interesting. There were over 2,000 passengers on the ship, and consequently, 1,500 passed away or died during the Titanic disaster. Typhoons every once in a while catches the mail. This is one. The cover was being sent via Siberia to Switzerland. And you can see the marking right here, damaged in typhoon. Very rare packet cover. And it's probably the only one to date, to my knowledge. This is an interesting story where a small ketch in New Zealand would carry the mail. This was a private mailing service delivering some of this mail, and consequently, I keep hitting the wrong button, but excuse me. A storm hit and it was sunk. It was recovered. You can see that the stamp was removed from the water, and you see Sunday Island stamps not available. This was a salvage from the Ketch Yvonne. There's two of these covers examples known in New Zealand, again, due to weather disasters. I'm sure you're all familiar with the Hindenburg disaster that covered over New Jersey and caught fire. Did it catch fire from the storm or did it catch fire from electric wire? That's some of the questions that are still not 100% sure. But it caused major disaster. Several passengers and crew members were killed. Out of 17,000 pieces of mail that were supposedly on board, only 357 pieces were salvaged. You all know that these are fairly expensive covers. This is one of 17 covers from the Dutch countries that were on that ship. This is a cute cover. This is probably the smallest Prexy flood cover. And you can see the auxiliary markings here damaged by flood right across there. It's a great little piece. Again, the damage by flood is not scarce, but certainly the envelope is scarce because I've never seen a miniature cover. This is the first one I've seen with actual markings such as this. Again, another typhoon cover. This was an interesting cover that took place in Hong Kong, China. And you can see the auxiliary or the postal markings here and here. And when this storm broke out, the post office was not even open, and the postal employees were on the other side of the river. And consequently, they made a special stamp, and this is what the stamp was just a circular cancellation. Because the post office was closed. So this hand stamp was used for about 4 hours, from anyway 11 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. on this particular day. Very interesting cover, and certainly a very scarce cover. Well, mail robbery, I've written a whole book about, and I have over 400 illustrations on that particular book. And if you ever see it, I'm sure you would enjoy it. But it's part of my presentation, and I do have a few very interesting covers here. There was an interesting exhibit at the Postal Museum in Washington several years back, where it indicated that there was an average of about 3,000 mail robberies a year and only about 300 convictions. So it sounds like stealing mail is a pretty good business because only about 10% of them get convicted. Today, unfortunately, they have the keys to the blue boxes, the thieves. And sometimes on the weekends, when mail is usually transporting through the postal service, they open these boxes and they look for the mail, and then they have some kind of ink eraser or chemicals that actually erase the ink, and they put their name on the check. And sometimes they can even change the actual volume or the determination of how much money may have been on that check. So this is something to think about. Go inside the post office from now on instead of putting your mail in a blue box. I think you have less issues. This is the earliest known U.S. mail robbery, 1841. It went from New York, Canandaigua, New York, to Mansfield, Ohio. And you can see the marking right here, the auxiliary marking, which basically states it was broken up by mail robbers at Fredonia. This has an APS, this has a PF certificate on it. Interesting. This is the front of the cover. There's a page, stampless cover. And again, this is the earliest known U.S. mail robbery. This, for example, is a mail robbery that occurred in Australia near the goldfields. It's a very interesting cover, but you can see 1856, the red ink that was applied here is signing the fade. And basically what it really said here was recovered from the mail robbed at Beechwood Road in Australia. And these are two official newspaper clippings basically describing the particular robbery in this particular case. This is a very interesting cover where it was done by a private horseback rider, you might say, mail delivery, went from Charles, Louisiana to London. But it went from Charles, Louisiana, and finally was stolen in that particular area. And it was there's no stagecoaches in Louisiana in this period of time. Stagecoaches didn't take place till 1858. But regardless of that, it was an 82-mile route where this mail was recovered. It was going from Louisiana all the way to England. It was recovered. It finally got to New Orleans, and by then, by steamboat, it followed its way up to New York, and from New York, it was sent on to London. So it's a very interesting cover. You can see the back here recovered from stolen mail, signed by the postmaster at the time. But it's a very, very rare cover. Another cover, Shangani Rebels, mail time in military conflicts is not uncommon. This is one of the conflicts. This is more like a civil war between the Shangani rebels in Rhodesia and the British personnel. And it was recovered, and you see here the mail recovered from mail stolen stolen by the rebels at Shangani. There are two of these covers known. This is one of the two. This is probably the nicer of the two, actually. But if you ever go to the computer and Google it, you'll see another cover as well. There's two known covers. This was an interesting mail robbery on the steamship in 1910. Steamship was going from Alaska to Seattle, and the crew of three individuals wound up breaking into the post office, actually an official post office on this ship. And this post office was carrying 30 pounds of gold and $5,000 in banknotes. So you can imagine that's a pretty heavy weight in gold. But I guess the thieves didn't think that the ship had to come to land, stop on land. Anyway, the post office was broken open and the thieves were caught. Money, gold under several of the employees that broke into the post office. They were all caught and arrested prior to the ship docking and unloading. Very interesting cover, but what I think is funny about it, you can see here the auxiliary marking where it's damaged in the mail robbery, Steamship City of Seattle, October 1910. But I think the fun part was that it was actually the address to the Royal Mounted Police, the envelope. So kind of an interesting combination. Another train robbery by the Dutraman brothers. I'm not going to go into this a lot at this point in time, except I want to show you that there are two different markings. One is a rubber stamp describing the robbery, and the other one is a label that's often applied to the robberies. Sometimes you don't have both. You usually have one or the other. I think Bob Toll might be talking about this a little later. War is also a man-made natural disaster, the cause of mail interruptions worldwide. And I don't have to tell you how terrible war is anywhere in the world, but it's certainly a big problem. This is a great cover. You ever have blind mail go through the mail? This is a wonderful cover on Braille mail delayed during the Spanish Civil War in 1936. And if you can see here, you can see the Braille outlined on the cover. And it actually was going through the Spanish Civil War at the time. And here you can see the postmark, or not the postmark per se, but the arrival markings and the sensor marking, which is in green. Here, as you see, the arrival marking when it finally arrived to its place in France. But in either case, it's a great cover, and you don't see Braille mail too often in the mail these days. World War II, the bombing of Pearl Harbor. This is one of two covers taken off the USS Nevada on the bombing the bombing of Hawaii, you might say, in this period of time. This is a great cover. You can see the stamp is missing, and here's the markings from the postal inspector. There are two of these covers known, and this has also been reported in Hogarth and Gwynn, which is a great book on postal interruptions, particularly by ships and things of that nature. But it's a great reference on a lot of this material that I'm even showing you today. This is the only cover that survived the nuclear bombing of Hiroshima in 1945. This is a cover that was found on the debris of a church. I became acquainted with this cover at a stamp show in Essen, Germany, at the International Stamp Fair about 3 years ago. And this cover is actually still radioactive today. And you can see it in this glass metal casing that I have it in. I do not own this cover, but I thought it was significant to show it because I didn't even know it was any mail. This is the only mail that was ever recovered from nuclear disaster. Terrorism is becoming more and more prominent today everywhere in the world, and it also affects the postal delivery service as well. This particular case was not very happy. I guess the son who blew up his mother, plane, and passengers and crew was not a happy camper. Apparently, he just wanted the insurance money that he had on his mother. Pretty sad. But this is a cover that actually took place where he put a bomb in the mother's suitcase when he boarded it on the plane. And consequently, it took 3 years to find out that the son actually caused the murder and the killing of all the people that were on the plane. Very sad cover, but it happens, unfortunately. Another similar cover, a little different from personal. This was a Bulgarian Air Force shooting down a civilian Israeli airliner in 1955. And here's some of the mail that was recovered from that particular disaster. You can see the Israeli markings here describing basically a bomb took place. Another bomb also destroys a plane in Cyprus, Greece. You can see the markings here, kind of faded, but this is from one of the books where I was able to photograph. You can see some of the Greek writing that basically states that the bomb took place and blew up the ship or blew up the plane. Well, there was no one that complained or admitted to causing this disaster. But interestingly enough, 2 years later, you can see this postcard. Let me go back. Hopefully you can see it. I'm just going to try to move this away. Okay, now I got it up top. We're good. This is a great postcard. Here you can see the back of the card, and here you can see the front of the card, which had a bunch of animals on it. But in either case, apparently, this was a cover of an Ethiopian airliner took off from Greece and landed in Frankfurt, Germany. While the plane was on the tarmac, you might say, and the cleaning people came on, apparently 2 terrorists planted bombs on the passenger surface of the plane. And the plane blew up on the ground. Didn't kill anybody, fortunately, but it did cause a major explosion. Apparently, it was the Eritrean Liberation Front that claimed responsibility, saying that the bombs were retribution for the transportation of Ethiopian troops. I guess there was a military conflict in that particular part of the world, and consequently, they blew up the plane. But these were the same people that blew up the other bomb, or put the other bomb on the plane that flew from Greece and killed everybody. Well, here you can see bomb destroys Swiss air flight to Tel Aviv. Another bomb was placed on the plane, and here you can see the Swiss markings describing the bomb, Tumi bomb that blew up the plane. There are German and Swiss covers noted that were on this disaster. This was an interesting cover that was sent from Malta to London. The cover was so heavy and so bulky that it created some questions by the Postal Service. Consequently, they thought it might have been a bomb in the envelope. And the Metropolitan Police examined it. Interestingly enough, it wasn't a bomb. It was lottery tickets. And the lottery tickets caused the bulkiness of the mail. But here you can see the branch of the explosive division of the Metropolitan Police of Scotland Yard. I thought that was kind of an interesting cover with the with the lottery tickets inside. Another disaster, a lot of airmail disasters, a lot of terrorism. These are hijacked covers at the particular time in some of the Muslim countries. And this was in 1974. Terrorists were dressed as mechanics and stormed the civilian airliner. The stewardess was killed. Eventually, the four hijackers and seven others, Palestinians, gave themselves up. But they didn't give themselves up until they killed one more hostage, and that hostage was an American soldier that was on the plane at the time. Very sad. Another situation, hijack cover again, very similar to what we just saw. This particular slide is we've all heard of the Unabomber. And this was Ted Kaczynski was the Unabomber, and he did about 20 different bombings over about a 15-year period, killing a few people. He was finally captured or caught because he wrote a dissertation about how he hates America or whatever, and consequently it was recognized by his brother that turned him in because his brother knew about the situation. Very interesting. There are about 12 of these covers known. They're very collectible covers, naturally. And you can see some of the bombing that took place on Flight 444. And the flight was actually redirected to Washington, where it landed at Dulles, not at Dulles Air Place, but at the Washington airport. It was a lot of smoke damage. The plane, no one was hurt. There was some smoke issues, but this individual was finally captured. There was a plane that took place, a plane that was shot down, and the plane was a civilian airliner which was entitled 007. You would think this might have been, the true 007, the movie The 007. Anyway, it went off course, and the Russian military shot it down. The reason that they really shot it down, there was a Congressman, Lawrence Patton McDonald, on the plane, who was a very anti-communist individual and constantly gave Russia a very difficult time in the U.S. Congress. This is why it was shot down, to kill this individual. No mail, no bodies, nothing of that airplane was ever recovered from that disaster when the Russian military actually shot down the plane. It landed in such deep water that nothing ever surfaced, not to my knowledge and not that I've read about. Except they made a memorial service for the congressman, and this is what I'm showing you here. And you can see right here, victory over, remember Larry McDonald, mainly because of communism that he was so upset against. And this is what happened. Another terrorist bombing. This is Pan Am Flight 103, the Lockerbie disaster. You probably remember this in 1988, where it blew up over Scotland from a bomb. And it was put on by Libyan Muslim terrorists at the time. They finally caught the individual. They put him in jail and put him in jail for life. About 7 or 8 years after serving, he somehow got out on a sickness issue that he was going to die of illness. Well, that was pretty tricky because that wasn't the case. And he wound up living for several years thereafter until he actually died. So things happen in those fashions with politics in one way or another. And this is one of the situations. But this is a very rare cover. This is even a scarcer of the two covers. This is another Lockerbie cover. And this cover was actually in a courier's bag, in a briefcase. This is one of two covers that was in his briefcase that was recovered about 6 months after the disaster. There's only about 12 Lockerbie covers are known to exist, and this happens to be two different Lockerbie covers, and they actually have different auxiliary labels, as you can see here. And this material originally dispatched December 1988, delayed due to recovery. from the courier shipment in the Lockerbie air disaster. So it's a very interesting cover and again, extremely rare. Well, sometimes you can have issues with Colombian and Bogota and the mafia. We might say not just the mafia, but we might just say the Colombia drug cartel actually put a bomb on the plane to kill the chief of police. And that's what this cover is representing. Other political aspects. This is an interesting cover where a Christmas seal was on the front of a cover that was sent to Sweden. And that was the issue. Sweden doesn't accept any religious material, particularly on the front of a cover. If it was put on the back of the cover, the Christmas card or the card would have been delivered. Meanwhile, it was returned to the destination. I thought that was very interesting. I didn't realize how anti-religious Swedish areas are. And consequently, the mailing label or the Christmas label or seal was on the front of the cover, and it was rejected. This is another interesting cover where it went through Greece during a political military coup, and consequently it was delayed. And you could see the markings on it, revolution and here, this is an extremely rare cover where it went from Hanoi through Indonesia on its way to Paris, but it went through Greece and it was delayed. And this is the marking why it was delayed. Very interesting cover. This is another interesting cover where it was an Israeli cover that was going to Romania, and they refused delivery because they just had no political aspects or political relationships with Israel at the time. And consequently, it was returned. Other unusual events, such as this particular letter that was found in Lake Champlain, and it was recovered, I guess, a few days after it was mailed, or a few months after it was mailed. And this was the postal notation that was on there, basically discovering that the enclosed letter was recovered at Lake Champlain in April of 1863. Here you can see another cover. This was due to the death by drowning of the postman. And consequently, this is what it was all about. So the letter actually was returned because of the death of the postman. This is another interesting cover. Postmaster dies in the Fraser River. This was a cover that was delivered by an individual by the name of William Sheep McDonald. He was actually a farmer that had a contract to deliver mail, particularly around the gold fields in his area of California and Connecticut or wherever he was at the time. But the story was that the river was so rough when he was delivering the mail, and consequently he was in a canoe, and the canoe actually turned over and he died or drowned. The mail was recovered, and you can see lost in the Fraser River is the marking here. This was the same cover, just basically lost in the Fraser River. This particular cover, also very interesting. Mail wagon and horses fall in the river, similar to what has been happening. I have a bunch of these covers, interestingly enough, where horses and so forth and so on were actually involved in delivering the mail, but also dying in the delivery of the mail. And this was a cover that was on its way from New York, from Grand Central Station, to try to get on the boat. And consequently, it had to go over the bridge and across the canal area to get onto this boat. And consequently, it didn't realize that the ship just left the port. So the horse and everything fell into the river. And unfortunately, or fortunately, the postman did not drown, but the horses drowned and the mail was badly damaged. Another situation where the postman in China failed to put labels or stamps on the mail. Consequently, he was arrested for that simple situation. This is a very interesting cover that two individuals stole the plane with mail on it. They stole the plane to join the Nazi army in 1939. And here you can see on it, robbed by the Garms, German airmen, after escaping. So they stole the plane that had mail on it and consequently left it in that area. And we're talking about in New Guinea, Australia area. Consequently, uh, consequently, it was recovered. This is an interesting cover during the nuclear disaster outside of Finland that took place in Russia, if you remember that. And it was delayed because of the nuclear situation. And consequently, this is the only cover I've ever seen. And what's nice about it is it has a couple interesting stamps for stamp collectors on the front of it. Very interesting combination. Certainly, some other animals have to eat, and consequently, this was a couple rats eating across a letter on the bottom of a ship on a steamer that was actually going to Australia. Thought it'd be interesting to see. I have a whole talk on what's eating your mail, and happens to be one of those covers. Well, this is a great postcard, and I show this as the last slide on this presentation because I'm sure you're getting tired of hearing me talk. But in either case, this is a great postcard of the cats visiting another cat within the hospital. The most interesting thing is the marking right here. And that marking states delivery of this mail was curtailed because your carrier was endangered by a dog running loose in your delivery area. Now, how quaint is that between cats and dogs, particularly on a postcard? And with that, I want to thank you for listening to my conversations and listening to some of my interesting covers. And I hope I didn't put too many people to sleep. But at the same time, think of some of these things on postcards. They also make a significant addition to whatever you do collect within postal stationery.
Thank you, Stephen. But before we ask a question, I think I'll show the slides. I'll share my screen, and Bob can tell something about the unusual postcard as well.
Yes. Well, these are
Oh,
apparently two
no.
postcards that were related to interruptions of mail due to one form or another.
All right, doesn't look like Bob Toll is here. All right, so we could just share and see what it is. So basically, is a postcard that was damaged by fire and dynamite on a holdup in Ashland and Berger on train number 13 in
Right.
Oregon in October 1923. So
That
this is
was all,
one and
Clarissa, that was also due to the Dutremont brothers. There was four brothers.
four
And,
brothers, okay?
yeah. And they used so much dynamite to kill the postman. And
Oh, no.
consequently, they blew up the money also. So then they had to run for their lives. And they were eventually caught. And they eventually died in jail. So that's basically the story of that situation.
Okay, so this is what the second slide.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's actually a Kurt Type Company postcard.
Okay. And then last slide is this is a book that Stephen wrote. It's a pretty heavy book. I saw it. It's 400 illustration. Is huge. So if you are interested to purchase one, I put on the chat his email address that you can contact him for that.
Thank you.
It's a very colorful and illustrated book.
Steve, thank you. This is Philip in Baltimore.
Hmm.
And just curious, does the Postal Service now mark all mail that's had a problem, had an interruption of some kind? I've never heard of these kinds of markings before, and I'm curious if it's
Yes, they
current.
do. Yes, they do. Recovered mail, whether it be one item or a whole bag of items, are usually have specific auxiliary markings on them from the Postal Service. Some of them are exceptional, where you get a letter as well as the marking on the envelope. But generally speaking, 99% of the time, these are now marked. And as I mentioned earlier, it might be interesting if you find them on postcards. That'd be an extra special thing for your collection.
Thank you, Jim. Unmute yourself.
Yes,
Jim,
fantastic presentation. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
I'm also interested in the rubber stamps. It seemed like they were actually creating rubber stamps and stamping individual pieces of mail, or do they have a rack of these things in case of a disaster? They just grab the appropriate stamp and stamp the cover.
I think both of that is true. I'm sure they have certain stamps related to that when they do recover mail. Some of the mail, goes in the lost and found. But yeah, and some rubber stamps are made specifically, believe it or not, when there's a certain amount of mail. A lot of times the markings could be in handwritten notation by the postmaster. It's nicer to find the written ones versus the stamped ones, but when you see the stamped ones, you have to assume that there's more than one versus a singular cover. But yeah, they have some markings or rubber stamps right in the office there, and they use it when they have to use it. But it's nice to get a postmaster letter to go associated with it. Not all recovered mail has that.
And
sure,
that is,
Jim.
Stephen, really good job. I'm assuming that you have a collection of these yourself, or you don't own everything that you were showing us tonight, right? But you do have a collection of these things?
What I showed you, I own. I have
Really?
every one of the covers in my collection.
Fantastic.
My collection is about 1,700 different items.
John, how do you find these? How do you possibly find a new one?
Well, I have to go to Europe because I collect around the world.
Yeah.
So I pretty much found everything in the United States that I can possibly find by going to a number of various shows over a long period of time.
How many
Dealers
people do you
find
think there are who collect around the world? How many specialists like you do you think there are?
There's at least 100. I'm a member I'm a lifetime member, you might say, of the Wreck and Crash Mail Society. Okay. And
There
we
is a
have
society, Wreck and Crash Mail.
Wreck and
Okay.
Crash Mail Society, and we have a quarterly journal, and there's collectors from around the world. We have about 75 members of our group, and a lot of the airmail collectors, that collect air crashes and things of that nature, are also members of our society, besides maybe the Airmail Society. And but what I showed you is all of my collection personally. I have over 400. Well, I don't have 400, but I have several hundred mail robbery covers in my collection, which are pretty scarce. And the book that I published has over 400 examples from around the world. But I go to shows in Europe virtually every year, particularly in London, and consequently, I've been able to find things. And then, dealers that you meet find things for you too. And I have a bunch of dealers that constantly call me or I find some things in auction catalogs from around the world. I get a number of auctions that I look at. But I'm starting to get up there in age like everybody. And I'll be buying probably less and less, but recently I bought a bunch of mail robbery covers in a major auction of a friend of mine that's also a member of the Wreck and Crash Mail Society recently. So, we buy from each other when they go up for auction, And so I've been collecting this material for a good 25 years now. Yeah.
So Kevin says, interesting presentation. I'm a lifelong banker and can attest to the theft of mail from USPS boxes around the US. Most recently, the thief that do not have stolen keys use a simply fly strip bought at a hardware store. They open the mailbox door, drop it inside, and pull on the string to lift out of the mail. Then they wash the ink of the checks and not their own name.
Yeah. But some of them have the keys too.
How do they have the keys?
Yeah, they stole it from the postman.
Uh,
If you look, if the back cover of my book shows you that the robber is holding the postman on his knees in front of the blue box with a gun, which is the back cover of my book. So that's all,
Jeremy?
that's kind of indicated.
Jeremy, you have
a quick
question?
question. I do work in Arizona postal history. Wondering if you have any robbery or any cards related to Arizona that you might think of off the top.
Yes, I do.
I'd love to contact you.
Yeah, I do.
Okay,
Mhm.
thank
All
you.
right.
Sure.
Lila says they had all the same key for all the mailboxes.
Well, I don't know if it's the same key, but it's usually for a region of keys, region of boxes. I think the keys do change from different regions.
But that doesn't, is not a consolation because the same region, they can buy all the
Yeah,
boxes
yeah.
with one key.
One key get you into a lot of boxes.
That's why I mail when I really, really be careful with my mail. I put it inside the post office in the box that goes directly on the back.
I recommend that to everybody.
Yeah.
Oh, there was also an article in the New York Times about mail being opened to get checks. And a postal inspector recommended that if you're sending a check in the mail, let's say to a utility company or to your credit card company, do not use the envelope they supply to you.
Mm.
Use a plain white business size envelope, write the address in it on the front with a ballpoint pen in small letters, and use a very generic stamp. And if you do that, your chances of getting through the mail or even in a box that they're breaking into are greatly reduced because it's not something they're looking for. They're looking for specific kinds of envelopes.
Yeah, mostly registered, but what you say is correct. You don't want to have, eye glaring cover with a lot of unusual stamps on it, perhaps.
Unless
But
it's something harmless inside.
yes, yes. Like
Then it doesn't matter.
Right, right.
Jacqueline, and actually I want to welcome because Jacqueline is our new member on the Capitol Beltway Postcard Club. So welcome.
Right.
And
As you can see behind me, I don't know which side it's showing up on me, but this is from the Postmark Posse, which is the greater Los Angeles area post crossing group. But as far as check fraud, having been on the board of an organization that had check fraud,
Mhm.
the best thing you can do is mail the check through your bank. In other words, go online, you got to this meeting, you can get online, and you send the check via the bank, which is insured. So if that check gets stolen, you're not out the money. If you write a check at home and take all the precautions and wrap it up and do everything you're supposed to, and it gets stolen, you're out the money. So do it through your bank and it's insured. That's just all I wanted to say about that. Unfortunately. Yeah, and if the moment you put your hands in the box and it feels sticky, get your hand out of there and take the letter home and go to the post office. Anyway. Yeah, the ones by me are the ones here in LA are all taped up. You have to go to a post office. Down in Palm Desert, where I'll be tomorrow, nice and sunny, but not quite as warm as the Virgin Islands.
in some of the new mailboxes, they have a very, very thin slot.
Yeah.
Very, very thin. It's like barely you can put your mail in it. You
Yeah.
can put 1 or 2 postcards in there at the same
Yeah, it
time.
has rollers. You can't pull it out.
Right.
But
What's Sherry's asking, what's your most expensive cover you have?
Probably the Titanic as a major example. I also have the earliest known mail robbery of 1745 in my collection as well, of the Jacobite Rebellion cover. There was 3 such covers known. One is in the British Museum in Bath in England, and the other one is, believe it or not, by a Scottish collector. Those are very rare covers. The most expensive mail robbery cover is in the Smithsonian and the Postal Museum there in Washington, where they were stolen by Indians in the 1860s. There are 2 such covers. They go for about $380,000 a cover, just chump change for some people. But in either case, there's 2 known covers like that. One is on loan to the library. So those are pretty expensive covers. And a lot of the covers that I have are not cheap covers. They're several thousands of dollars, but a lot of them are a lot less as well. So I think there's more $200, $300, $400 covers than there are $2,000 and $3,000, $5,000 covers. But it's a great area to cover. It's very interesting, and it's a total different aspect, and that's why I call it the devil's mail. There's a lot of it is involved in death and destruction as well. And I had the honor of being the only exhibit at Stampex 2 years ago, where they took a lecture that I gave at the Postal Museum, not at the Postal, the Postal Museum, not the Postal Museum, the APS headquarters in Philadelphia, or in Pennsylvania, rather. I did a talk there on the devil's mail, and one of the individuals came up to me and said, "Dr. Berlin, would you by chance have any material I could take back with me?" So I kindly gave her my thumb drive for my presentation. A year goes by, she calls me up and says, "Dr. Berlin, I want you to know that I liked your thumb drive, so we're going to have a little exhibit here at Stampex, and I understand you're going to be coming, so I'd like for you to see me so I can show you what we've done." Well, lo and behold, I didn't know what they did, but mine was the only exhibit shown at Stampex that year. And what they did is they took my 60-some slides that I gave to this individual, and they put it on 4 slides on a 6-foot frame, 6 by 4-foot frame. They had 12 of them that lined the whole wall of the stamp show in London. So in other words, when you walked into the show, you saw my whole exhibit on the wall of about 12 frames, each 6 feet long, 4.5 feet wide. I mean, I can show you myself and my wife standing next to the frame. You can get a full idea of how big this was. It was the only exhibit that they had at the stamp show. And the reason they had that, because they changed the size of the show to a smaller area. So they didn't have the 100 or 200 exhibit frames that they might have had. So they used my exhibit as an example, and it just kind of blew me away when I saw that. I mean, imagine your exhibit on a whole wall, not just a 6-foot frame.
Yeah.
Where you have 16 pages for a frame. This was a whole walk-in wall. So
yeah, that should be amazing.
that
Kyle,
was-
you have a question?
One mail is delayed if someone doesn't pay the full postage rate. Do you consider that interrupted mail?
Yes, it is. It is interrupted mail when you fail to put the rate on it, but it's such a common idea, such a common thing. I don't really collect it unless there's something very unusual that's written on it from the postman. Because you can put fraudulent stamps on there too. you can put just decals, basically. Sometimes that'll go through the mail. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Michael?
I have a question. Does registered mail ever get stolen?
Yes, they're always looking for registered mail. That's number one. So,
I thought the point of
Um,
sending it registered was so it wouldn't get stolen.
well, unfortunately, it does. It gets stolen. Yeah, they rob the trains. They rob the postal trucks that carry the mail in bags.
Okay.
So yes, that's the best mail that they can steal, because usually it does contain jewelry and sometimes gold
Yeah.
bullions too. Well, I want to thank everybody for their time, and I want to thank you, Clarissa, for helping me get this on the computer. And I want to thank everybody for attending, and I appreciate your time as well.
And I will thank you to give the presentation. And I'll give you a virtual applause from everybody, because this was really fantastic and very interesting, totally unusual.
Yes.
Usually it was covers and not postcard, but we can imagine the same thing happen on postcard. Why there is only a postcard that are found, actually? That's my question, as opposing envelopes.
Well, it's a good question. Maybe most of the postcards get thrown away.
They get thrown away when they don't get delivered?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
no.
I don't think that's necessary, but I guess an envelope it's a little heavier than a postcard, so sometimes it gets lost. Who knows? Who knows? But there's got to be markings on the postcards as well when they're interrupted like that.
But it seems that you found very few of postcards with marking as opposing mail.
That
or
is
envelope.
correct. That is correct.
All right. Last night, Jacqueline says it's okay. Once Greek post office burned the warehouse of backed up mail during a strike.
Oh yeah, that's a
All
good
right.
card.
Yeah.
Post offices do burn down.
But this
No,
one
it
looks
was
like
I
deliberately. My
understand.
cousin
I
lives in
understand.
Athens, and I wrote her a letter, and I didn't get it, and we finally spent the money for a phone call 25, 30 years ago. And she said there was a strike, they burned up rather than try to deliver the backlog.
Yeah.
that's a
How about the postman that doesn't want to deliver the mail and sticks it in his closet for 30 years?
Do you also collect body bags?
I don't collect body bags, but I do have some big bags where some stuff was stolen in. Yes, I do have.
A lot of times when the mail gets torn in the canceling machines and so forth, they put the pieces into a plastic bag and send the
Right.
plastic bag on.
Sure.
And so that's kind of a body bag for the item. I was just wondering at some of these things that are interrupted mail, like the ones that got burned, whether they put those into body bags and sent them on.
A lot of times they do. A lot of times they do.
Mailed is always strange. I mailed 4 or 5 Christmas letter on the 29th of December to Italy, and they all arrived all over Italy, not in one place, exactly a month later. All of them. So they were forgotten. I don't know what happened.
Right.
Yeah. So it's mail is always sometimes mysterious on how
It's
things are.
it's the markings on the cover that really make the difference.
Yeah, I'm sure there were no marking. They were just delayed.
Mhm.
They don't always mark them. I think when they delay in Italy, I don't think they mark them as delayed. They just deliver them. Be happy that you got it.
Yes.
It's the same with Greece,
I see.
where we correspond with a lot of people there. And a lot of times it takes 4 or 5 months,
Oh, wow.
the letter.
Yeah. Months for Italy is very typical. I will thank again Stephen very, very much for his presentation. And now we're looking forward to see him at our meetings, even if we don't have stolen mail.